Welcome to CityCast Denver. I'm Paul Caroli, and here's what Denver's talking about. Hey, what's up? How are you today? We've got a couple of unexpected absences on the CCD team today, so we are dipping back into the archives for another CityCast Classic. I thought this one would be interesting because neglected buildings are in the news again. Sam Tabachnik at the Denver Post had an amazing story last week about this local investor named John Craze, who has found a loophole that allows him to buy up these nasty old properties and sell them for a profit. Some folks are worried his loophole is ripe for abuse, while others are grateful that someone has found a way to do something about these abandoned buildings. It's a brilliant story, and I'm putting the link in the show notes, and I'm also proud to share the following interview that our host Bree Davies conducted last year with then Westward reporter Katie Cheshire. They talk about some new rules that City Council was just about to pass, giving expanded authority of the city to crack down on the owners of these abandoned properties. And I just thought it was fascinating, and this interview was really enlightening. So after you listen, I'd love to hear what you think. Just leave us your name and neighborhood in a text or a voicemail at 720-500-5418. That's 720-500-5418. Oh, and if you're not already subscribed to our weekly shopping guide newsletter, Keep It Local, now is seriously the time. We've got a special edition going out today, this afternoon, as some people hear it on Thursday, and it celebrates Colorado's 150th anniversary. We've pulled together a bunch of insider tips and recommendations for all the best stuff to do and buy at some of Denver's oldest and longest running businesses. I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate the holiday. So please enjoy the interview and check out Keep It Local, and see y'all tomorrow.
Katie Cheshire, welcome back to CityCast Denver.
Thank you so much for bringing me back.
So, Katie, do you have a favorite derelict rundown building?
I can't say that I have a favorite because they all kind of suck, but I will say reporting on the fourplex on Lincoln Street that exploded at this point now 2 years ago was very exciting because, first of all, there was an explosion, and it was one of those situations where there wasn't neighbors right next to it because the neighbors all moved out right away.
Oh.
And usually it makes me sad to hear from the neighbors or angry. So that one was more enjoyable because at least there was not people who lived, right next door.
Had to live with, yeah, and we'll talk more about this building, but it was one that exploded, and then the owner of it just let it sit there post-explosion for almost a year as just rubble.
Yeah, and the city couldn't even get a hold of the owner for like 3 months. They were like, this person has apparently disappeared completely. And that is the story of a lot of abandoned buildings in Denver.
Well, we'll get into some of those specific instances in a minute, but you recently reported that there are some changes coming to how the city deals with these buildings. Before we get into that, can you explain what kind of building we're talking about when we say, this one was an explosion, but what else qualifies as like a derelict building?
Yeah, so if there has been no one living there for a certain period of time, generally about 6 months, then it can be considered abandoned. If there's like broken windows or broken doors or broken gates and people can just go in and out as they please, that can make a building be considered abandoned or neglected. And then if there are like service calls to the property from police or fire or the homeless outreach team, then it can also be considered abandoned.
Okay, so I was thinking about this because there's a house actually right across the street from me that's had 2 different fires start there. It's clearly nobody's living in it, but I just wonder, like, does the city have to send someone out to officially declare it derelict?
And the answer is yes.
Okay.
The city has a list called the Neglected and Derelict Building List, and they add properties to it. In the last few years, they've really picked it up. It slowed down during the pandemic, as many things did, because they didn't have staffing, especially they used to, well, they still do, but they might change the fact that they have to have hearing officers, and they suspended all hearings for a while there during COVID. So in the last few years, they've really picked back up identifying buildings, putting them on this list, and trying to deal with them.
So that maybe why we saw such a rise in derelict buildings on this list was just there wasn't the staff to sort of collect that information in the last couple of years, like post-COVID?
Absolutely. And so I think it kind of freaks people out to hear that in 2024, we added 160 buildings to the list. And the list is around 280 buildings total. So it looks like, oh my gosh, 2024 was so awful.
It was the worst year for derelict buildings in the last decade. Yeah.
But it's not likely that that's the case. The more likely explanation is the city finally had resources to really devote to digging into this problem and discovered that it is a huge one.
Okay, so it's like it's been an ongoing problem, but like we didn't have like an explode, or that probably isn't the best word. We didn't have like a super rise for any reason other than the city didn't have the staff to find these buildings and start tracking. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense now, because I was looking at that data and was like, geez, do we have like an epidemic of shitty buildings? But
I mean, we kind of do, but it's not specific to the last few years. I don't think it's more we just are identifying them.
Okay. So, I mean, other than being an eyesore, does a neglected building cause anyone harm?
So, in both a literal sense and sort of like a metaphysical sense, yes. The more intangible sense is, we're a city that does lack affordable housing and housing options in general. So when there's a house sitting abandoned, it's sad because someone could live there and use it. And same thing with the commercial property. If there's a commercial property sitting there empty, that could be used for a business that would bring life to a community instead of nothing. And then in the literal sense, abandoned buildings or lots or storefronts tend to attract people who are looking for a place to sleep and, can't fault them for that. But a lot of times it results in, fire at these properties. Like calls to 911 and 311 tend to be very high in these places. And then that takes those resources away from other areas of the city. So that's a big reason why there's a harm. And then also, there's like trash and that can float into people's yards. It's not the worst thing, but I imagine it's super frustrating if you're a homeowner and you're trying to keep your home nice and next door is abandoned and there's like wrappers floating over the fence and pieces of paper and you just can't do anything about it.
Because there's not a person there to like, hey, neighbor, could you like get your trash together? Because there's no one like inhabiting that space.
Right, and you can't just go over and clean it either because it's not your property. Yeah. So it's kind of a weird place for neighbors to be put in.
And I could see where like you could do a little bit of that maintenance just around the yard. But I bet a lot of folks, for safety reasons, wouldn't want to enter a building that is maybe not been inhabited for a long time or it looks boarded up, or just for safety reasons, I could see why neighbors don't want to just even interact with a building like that.
Absolutely. And I've talked to people who, are single people living in their houses, particularly single women, I think do get more worried. Just, I'm here alone and there's this place that is attracting random people who I don't know. It's not my neighbors. They could have any sort of intentions. And I completely understand how it's scary, even if no one is really committing a crime, if they're just like, I guess trespassing. But even if they're just hanging out in the front yard, it's like, that's a little iffy if you live alone or if you work nights and you have to get home in the dark. So
this episode is brought to you by the Colorado Lottery. Did you know Colorado is turning 150 this year? The Colorado Lottery is celebrating this big birthday with 3 new prize-packed scratch games. Check out the new $5 150th birthday scratch game loaded with cash prizes, the $3 winning country scratch game with a top prize of $30,000, and the $10 Colorado Gold Rush scratch game with a top prize of $250,000. That's $250,000 that could be yours. Did you know that every game from the Colorado Lottery directly gives back to Colorado's great outdoors? Since 1985, the Colorado Lottery has given more than $3.7 billion back to parks, trails, open spaces, and recreation projects across the state. profits from the sales of these games are distributed to voter-selected groups like Great Outdoors Colorado, the Conservation Trust Fund, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and more. Celebrate the Centennial State's 150th birthday this year with the Colorado Lottery's special celebration scratch games. Must be 18 to play. Visit coloradolottery.com to learn more. That's coloradolottery.com. This episode is brought to you by the Colfax Avenue Business Improvement District. Celebrate Indie Week on Colfax now through August 1st with shopping, dining, drinks, fitness, karaoke, and specials at independent businesses throughout the district. Pick up a limited edition Colfax Colorado 150 canvas tote bag at Savage O Coffee and Ice Cream to unlock discounts at participating businesses, including Voodoo Donuts, Satellite Bar, X Bar, DNVR Bar, Ma's Kitchen, and more. Dude, you can even stop by the legendary Bound by Design or see the fab folks at Lemur Inc. for a Colfax flash tattoo. What? Enjoy karaoke at Pete's Satire Lounge and explore Ogden Street businesses such as Balanced Root and the Corner Beat. Visit colfaxab.com/indie-week for the latest participating businesses, tote discounts, events, and FaxPass specials. That's colfaxab.com/indie-week. Well, we're talking about this because all of the way that the city approaches this issue could be changing soon because City Council is debating a proposal that may help solve this problem. What exactly is this proposal?
Yeah, so I would say that there's three big parts to the proposal. The first part is currently, in order to make a property owner do anything, the city has to have a hearing. And for property owners that just aren't responding or don't show up, these hearings can take months and months to schedule, and it kind of spirals because if you can't even get someone to reply to you, how can you schedule a hearing? How can you make sure the hearing is fair and that they have legal representation if they want it, if they're not even replying? So that's really slowed down the process. And the new idea is that there will just be like a meeting within 60 days of a property being identified as neglected. And the meeting is just where you make a plan to fix it.
With the city, in the hopes that this landowner will answer maybe a meeting versus going to court.
Yes. And the other part kind of responds to that, which is if they don't come to the meeting, then they get another 30 days. The city will officially cite them at the time that they don't go to the meeting. After 30 days, then the city can petition Denver District Court to basically take a legal action, which says, if you keep neglecting this building, we could take it. And from there, after another 30 days, so, giving people a lot of time before the city would take over a property, it's good. Then the city can say, you know what? You still haven't replied to us. You have unpaid fines. This property's insecure. And they can appoint a receiver to take care of it, which is just a word for basically property manager.
So it seems like they're speeding up the process. They're instituting more fines. They're also, it sounds like they're trying to make it a little bit easier for property owners that are clearly just avoiding the situation to start working on something immediately versus asking them to come to court. But it sounds like this is a citywide issue that a lot of council members, I feel like there was a quote you had from like Jamie Torres, who's like, what city council member has not gotten a call like this? But what I found interesting is speeding it up still sounds like it takes forever. But like you said, that building that exploded on Lincoln sat almost like that for almost a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that took 11 months to be demolished. And this new process, I think, would be 120 days max. So it is a significant reduction. And they also increased the amount the city can fine people from $999 a day to $5,000
a day.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's only if, they aren't replying. If someone gets fined, they get usually 30 days to pay it. And then if they don't, the city can engage that everyday fine structure. And I think that honestly will make a difference because part of the problem is for a lot of these property owners, it's cheaper to just let it sit there than to reply to the city's fines.
Yeah, I remember reading in one of your stories, it was like this couple kept calling, like, we can't get a hold of this guy who's our neighbor. This house has started on fire. All these issues have happened. And when they finally did get a hold of him, he was like, yeah, I have a cash flow problem. So I'm just like letting that building sit until I have the money. But he doesn't have to live next door to that building.
Totally. And I think it's easier to let it sit if it's like, well, I got $1,000 compared to 5,000 even is a huge difference.
So hopefully that increase in fines may push that process. I actually drove by that spot on Lincoln last night, and it has been scraped, but it's now just an empty lot, which is better than literally a rubble after an explosion. So it's an interesting dichotomy to see what they're going to do next, but at least it's safer, it seems like.
Totally. And if it is an empty lot, that's part of the new ordinance too, that if lots are insecured and getting broken into, those can also be part of the neglected building list. And they couldn't be before. Well, and if city
just
council
an empty
says
lot.
No. Right. Just an empty lot, no building, because it's the building list.
Okay.
So they're changing it for cases where properties, that are lots only are getting broken into, and especially if they're near like schools or churches or rec centers, because that can pose safety issues too.
Because sometimes there'll just be a fence up and like maybe someone breaks in and the trash collects there and stuff. So that's interesting though, that it's cool that maybe that's something that the city is also looking to deal with, because it also kind of sucks to live next to an empty lot.
Yeah,
sure.
And I think it's all part of just this effort to activate more places, and it makes a lot of sense to include lots as well as buildings.
Well, let's talk about a couple more specific instances, because I think this will help listeners visualize more what we're talking about. Let's start with this church that was at the corner of Colorado Boulevard in Leetsdale. For a long time, I looked back on Google Maps for at least a decade, and it looked like it was in pretty bad shape at least a decade ago. It's since been torn down, and there's a development plan for it. But Councilwoman Sawyer said it got 165 calls to the city about it. What happened with this building?
Yeah, and within those 165 calls to the city, it was like over 200 employees that ended up using their time to work on this one
City
church.
employees.
Yes. And I think that is a lot of the frustration that council members feel is sometimes there's so many city departments that can be involved that it's like a too many cooks thing and nobody knows who to ask. And that was somewhat the case with this church is, the police department gets involved if there's a crime. The fire department gets involved if there's a fire, or even a wellness check can sometimes be fire. That could be police. It could be the special police homeless outreach team. It could be like even Denver Department of Public Health and Environment if there's health issues there. So this church just kept racking up problems. But if there is a serious crime committed at one of these places, that in the past has been like the only way to get them resolved, because then it could go to the court system. And that is what happened with this church, and which is sad. Like, we just don't want it to get to that point. So
that hopefully is what these changes could do, is eliminate the idea that you have to have a crime happen before the city takes serious action. Although it sounds like the city was trying to work on this issue if more than 200 employees had sort of been in contact with this building problem.
Yeah, and Amanda Sawyer called it the doom loop.
Yeah, what did she mean by that?
Yeah, and what she meant is what I was talking about with so many city agencies. It's like they get swirled around, bopped from place to place. At one point, this department's dealing with it. Then another department steps in and they're like, oh, this department is already dealing with it. Should I be doing this? And they kind of all like look around and nobody's actually taking ownership of it. So I think a lot of the changes are also aimed to really push that community planning and development.
Like have a point person there versus like, oh, I called CDPHE or I called zoning and, that's fire department. So you're saying part of this could be if we had one person in one department dealing with that property, it could get taken care of a lot faster.
Yeah. And just to make it clear, like who's in charge, and part of the ordinance, which is like more technical and boring, is they're going to update their internal tracking system for these buildings to kind of make it clear what departments might have already seen it or where it might have already been tracked or logged.
So they're just going to start keeping track of it, which sounds great.
Yes, but it takes technology that apparently they need to invest in and they don't have yet.
I want to talk about another structure. This house in Elyria, Swansea at 4665 Josephine Street. It's a boarded up single family home, kind of like we were talking about people being frustrated that this is a house that someone could be living in. But the neighbor has had some real issues with it. What is going on with this house?
Yeah, and there's sort of two silos. Like we talked before about the owners who just really don't care. And there are also owners who legitimately struggle to maintain properties for affordability reasons or other reasons. And I think this falls a little more into that second group. It's owned by Habitat for Humanity, which is a nonprofit. And, nonprofits don't have unlimited budgets. And this particular property, they can't let someone live there because there's asbestos, and that's in the main house. And then there's a detached garage in the back, which has meth contamination. So both of those are really expensive to fix. You can't have someone living there while they're doing it. So Habitat for Humanity has it boarded up because they need to wait until they have the funding to do it. And in the meantime, it has caused a bunch of problems for the neighbor. There's no gutter on one side of the house. So there's water damage because water just flows straight off the roof into the neighbor's yard. And, she says that she got an estimate to fix it that was $40,000, which is huge.
Yeah.
So it's one of those that is hard because it's not like Habitat for Humanity is some neglectful.
Some slumlord.
Right. But they just legitimately don't have the funds to rehabilitate this property the way that it should be.
They're kind of in this limbo. They don't have the cash flow, but they have a plan for the property, which is to either do that abatement, the asbestos abatement, or tear it down. But in the moment right now, they just don't have the money to do anything. Which is that this was an interesting case to me because I like the two silos thing you explained. I always kind of go more towards the a greedy developer that doesn't live in the state is just sitting on a property. But in reality, there's a lot of different reasons why properties might be in these states.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because you have to balance the legitimacy of that versus it is really impacting this neighbor and hurting them financially. And it's a reason that people could become unhoused, if their house has damage and they can't fix it and they just have to move, or they try to fix it and they go into debt.
Yeah. So you pointed out that the council district with the most abandoned buildings is mine, right here where we are in District 3, which is the west side of town. Why do you think it's happening so much here?
I think it is because of the rate of single family homes and kind of, in some ways, less attention from developers. Like now it's starting, I'm sure living here, the gentrifiers are here. But
I mean, they said that 10 years ago. I've lived on this side of town for 15 years and we're still watching to see what happens.
Right. So it's kind of, I think that's part of it is at this point, if developers do own lots, they're kind of waiting to see what they could do or what would make them the most money. If people own single family homes and have for generations, sometimes if the main inhabitant dies, those homes can become abandoned because the family doesn't really want to give up the house, but they
can't maybe invest in it or nobody wants to live in it at the moment, but it is their family equity.
Right. And so I think that is also a lot of the case more on the west side. It's historically a place where families have built that generational wealth, but it can get hard to maintain.
Yeah. I also think there's less Karens in this neighborhood. My neighbors are not super inclined folks to call the police on people or report these things. So I mean, at least I've noticed just living over here for a decade and a half is just people kind of mind their own business, And I just thought it was interesting because I do think of the house across the street from mine, but I can't think of a ton of other buildings in my neighborhood in this shape. So I don't know. It's interesting to see where it spreads out. The other neighborhood was District 9, right? Which is downtown, and maybe it's a wider swath of types of buildings in the neighborhood, but
yeah, I think District 9 is also where you see more commercial buildings that are part of the list because they have both downtown and Rhino, which I think Rhino has a lot of commercial buildings that are not being activated, and then they also have the city park area. And to your point about Karens, I do feel like the neighbors are very activated in that part of town. So it could be part of it is that they're if there's an abandoned building, they're on it.
there's people calling about it.
Yes.
Yeah. So you reported, let's talk about the money. This recent discussion about this proposal that, quote, council aides noted the city's pending budget deficit could come into play as the changes will likely require CPD to hire more employees and spend some money on internal infrastructure updates, like you were talking about the technology to track these things. But the city's already talking about layoffs and furloughs. How are they justifying these changes?
I think that the reason it's justified is right now, these are a drain on city budgets, especially 311 and 911, which are already struggling for money, especially 911 right now is actually looking at increasing fees because they need more funding. And so I think that's really the justification is at the end of the day, this could be one of those things that saves money in the long run. It's just that you have to invest first. And in the moment we're in, where the city doesn't have extra funds to invest, it's really hard.
And I think you reported that if they do pass this, if this proposal moves through council, it could technically take effect in February of 2026, but they're willing to push that if there isn't the money to do it.
Yeah, and I think they want it to take effect, but they also don't want the fact that maybe there's not money to mean they can't pass the bill. So that flexibility is kind of the safeguard to say, let's pass these changes and hopefully we can get some of them, if not all of them, rather than just leaving it how it is.
At least maybe start the process to change the process for derelict buildings.
Right. And even if all they can do is use the higher fine structure and they don't have, the improved tracking or the staffing ability to have the remedial plan meetings, that maybe that could be enough.
Yeah. What should someone do if they have one of these buildings on their block?
So you can do many things. You can call 311. I really don't recommend calling 911 unless there is a fire or an active crime that you can see happening, because it's just a struggle for 911.
It's taking up a lot of their resources.
Yes.
So 311's a better option if it's like not an active.
Yeah, and I think 311 is honestly more responsive anyways to these sort of non-active crime issues. And if you are having trouble with 311, you should reach out to your local council member. They see this all the time. It's something they really care about fixing, and they have done all this research to find out who they will need to connect you with.
Katie Cheshire, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell real estate investor / possible neighborhood savior John Craze about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at CityCast Denver. You can also subscribe to our morning newsletter at denver.citycast.fm. Thanks so much to all of our new neighbors. I'm talking to you, Tom S., Brenton M., Travis H., and Aaron W., who just joined our membership program. You all are awesome. You too can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Denver neighbor today at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you then.